The Oregon coast does not roar. It breathes. Long, heavy breaths that roll in from the Pacific and press against the cliffs like something ancient and patient. On certain nights, when the fog hangs low and the lighthouse beam cuts through the mist like a warning rather than guidance, the shoreline feels less like a place people visit and more like a place that watches. Far from the tourist shops and beachside diners, perched on a cliff that had been losing pieces of itself to the ocean for decades, stood the ghostly Tides Inn. A 3-story Victorian structure, paint peeling, windows narrow and watchful, porch lights flickering even when no one was near the switch. Locals didn't advertise it. They didn't recommend it. But they never said it wasn't open, because it always was. Daniel Harper had never believed in haunted places. He was 26, practical, methodical, analytical. Raised in Portland by a single mother who worked double shifts at a hospital, Daniel grew up believing in one thing. If something can't be explained, you just haven't found the explanation yet. His father had disappeared when Daniel was 8. Not dead, just gone. No note, no fight, no body. His mother never spoke about it, and Daniel learned not to ask. By the time he graduated college with a degree in architectural restoration, he had developed an unusual specialty. He restored old structures, historic homes, churches, abandoned buildings people were afraid to touch. He liked buildings with stories, because stories made sense. People, on the other hand, did not. When he got the email about a temporary structural assessment job at an old coastal inn in Oregon, he accepted without hesitation. The pay was high, the contract was vague, and the location was isolated. He liked isolated. The drive down the coast took 6 hours. By the time Daniel reached the cliffside road leading to the inn, the sun had already dropped behind the ocean. The road narrowed. Pine trees leaned inward like silent witnesses. And then he saw it. The ghostly Tides Inn. It was larger than the photos in the email. Older, weather-beaten, but structurally sound, at least from a distance. As he stepped out of his car, the wind shifted suddenly. Cold, sharper than expected. And for a brief second, he had the strange feeling that someone had been watching his arrival from one of the upper windows. The front door opened before he knocked. An elderly woman stood there, tall, thin, silver hair tied tightly behind her head. Her eyes were not welcoming, but they were not unkind. "You must be Daniel," she said calmly. Her voice was smooth, too smooth. "I'm Margaret Wells. I oversee the property." She did not offer her hand. She stepped aside. "Before you settle in, there are a few rules." Daniel almost smiled. Rules. Old buildings always came with rules. He followed her inside. The door shut behind him with a heavy final thud. Margaret turned slowly. "There are 5 things you must not ignore," she said, "if you want to stay past midnight." Daniel laughed lightly. He thought she was joking. Margaret did not. Margaret did not sit. She remained standing in the foyer, hands folded in front of her like someone reciting something memorized long ago. Daniel set his bag down near the staircase, still half amused. Margaret looked at him carefully. Then she spoke. "Rule 1. She paused, not for effect, as if making sure the house itself was listening. "If you hear knocking on your door after midnight," her eyes lifted slightly toward the ceiling, "do not open it." Daniel waited. "That's it?" he asked lightly. Margaret didn't smile. "It will knock 3 times." Her voice lowered. "Slow, even, patient." The chandelier above them flickered once. Daniel noticed. Margaret did not. "If you ignore it," she continued, "it will stop." "And if I don't?" Daniel asked, half joking. Margaret's expression changed just slightly. "Then it will think you invited it." Silence settled between them. Not awkward. Heavy. Daniel cleared his throat. "I'm assuming this is some kind of local folklore?" Margaret stepped closer. So close he could see faint blue veins beneath her thin skin. "No," she said softly. "It's maintenance advice." She turned and walked toward the hallway. "Your room is at the end, 3rd door on the left." She stopped walking. "And Mr. Harper?" He looked up. "Do not test the house." She disappeared around the corner. Daniel stood there for several seconds longer than necessary. Then he shook his head. Old buildings creak. Pipes knock. Wood expands. Everything has an explanation. Everything. Daniel's room was surprisingly well kept. Dark wooden bed frame, clean white sheets, a single armchair by the window. The window overlooked the ocean. The waves crashed against the rocks below like distant thunder. He unpacked slowly. Laptop, notebook, measuring tools. Everything normal. He ran his hand across the wall paneling. Solid oak. No moisture damage. No warping. Structurally, the place was better than expected. He sat on the edge of the bed. Listened. The inn made sounds. Old pipes shifting. Wind brushing against glass. Wood settling. Normal. All normal, and yet something felt off. Not dangerous, not threatening, just aware. He stood and walked to the window. Across the courtyard below, he could see another set of windows on the opposite wing of the inn. One of them was lit, the curtains slightly parted. And for just a second, he thought he saw someone standing there, watching. He blinked. The curtain moved with the wind. Nothing there. He exhaled. "You're tired," he muttered to himself. "Long drive, new environment, that's all." He turned off the lamp. The room fell into darkness. The ocean continued breathing. The clock on Daniel's phone read 12:14 a.m. He was not asleep. The wind had intensified. Rain tapped against the glass. The building groaned slightly under pressure. He stared at the ceiling. Then, knock. He froze. Soft, deliberate. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. Knock, pause. Knock, pause. Knock. His breathing slowed. Adrenaline does strange things. It sharpens everything. He checked his phone again. 12:16 a.m. Someone could be playing a prank. Margaret? Another guest? He sat up slowly. Listened. Nothing. Just wind. Just ocean. He swung his legs over the bed, walked toward the door. Stopped inches away from it. His hand hovered near the handle, and then a whisper. Not from outside the door, from the hallway, barely audible. Daniel. His stomach dropped. He stepped back immediately. That was not wind. That was not pipes. That was not imagination. The voice had been close, too close. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Minutes passed. Eventually, the silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt pleased. Daniel did not sleep. When morning finally came, it did not bring comfort. It brought light. And light, in old buildings, reveals details you missed in the dark. The hallway outside his room looked ordinary. No scratches on the door, no marks, no footprints. He opened it cautiously. Nothing. Just the long corridor stretching toward the staircase. He stepped out. The air felt stale, thicker than before, as if the house had been breathing differently during the night. He walked downstairs. Margaret was already in the dining room, pouring tea into a porcelain cup. "You look tired," she said calmly. Daniel studied her face. "You knocked on my door last night." It wasn't a question. Margaret did not look up. "No," she said simply. There was whispering. Daniel continued. "My name." She lifted the cup to her lips. "If you didn't open the door," she said, "then you're fine." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "Who else is staying here?" Margaret's eyes slowly rose to meet his. "Guests come and go," she said, "but they don't always leave." Daniel frowned. She stood up. "Rule 2, she said quietly. "If you hear your name spoken in the hallway," she walked past him toward the staircase, "do not answer it." Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. "You're telling me this place calls people by name?" Margaret stopped halfway up the stairs. "It only calls those it wants." Daniel needed logic, facts, evidence. He spent the afternoon inspecting structural beams in the attic. Everything stable. Old but reinforced. No hidden speakers, no modern wiring modifications. By late afternoon, he found something unexpected behind a loose wall panel in a storage corridor. A narrow staircase, unlisted in the blueprints he was given. It led downward, not to the basement, but to a smaller, sealed room beneath the central staircase. Inside were filing cabinets, dust-covered, labeled by year. Guest records. Daniel hesitated, then opened one. Most entries were normal. Names, dates, short stays. But some names had red markings beside them, and many of those entries ended without a checkout date. No departure, no notes. Just blank space after their final night. A cold sensation crawled up his spine. He flipped further. One name stopped him. Harper. First name unreadable, ink smeared. Date, 1998. His throat tightened. That was the year his father disappeared. That night, Daniel didn't wait for midnight. He confronted Margaret in the foyer. "My father was here," he said quietly. She did not deny it. She didn't look surprised. "You were always going to come back," she said. "Back?" His voice sharpened. Margaret stepped closer. "Rule 3, she said softly. "If you see someone standing at the end of the hallway," she paused, "and they look familiar." Daniel felt his pulse in his ears. "Do not walk toward them." Silence stretched thin. "You're saying my father—" "I'm saying," Margaret interrupted gently, "the house remembers its guests." The wind outside intensified. Somewhere above them, a floorboard creaked. Slow, measured, as if someone had just taken a step, on the second floor, exactly outside Daniel's room. Margaret's eyes shifted upward, and for the first time, she looked afraid. The creak came again. Slow, measured, intentional. Daniel didn't wait for Margaret this time.
He moved toward the staircase. Each step upward felt heavier than the last. The second-floor hallway stretched long and narrow, lit only by 2 dim wall lamps. The air felt colder here. Not drafty, cold, as if the temperature had been lowered just for this corridor. And then he saw him, at the far end of the hallway, standing perfectly still. A tall figure, broad shoulders, hands at his sides, half lit by the weak yellow light. Daniel's breath stopped. The face wasn't clear, but the outline, the posture, the way he slightly leaned to the right, exactly like the photos of his father. 28 years older, but unmistakable. "Dad?" Daniel whispered before he could stop himself. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, watching. Rule 3. If you see someone familiar at the end of the hallway, do not walk toward them. Daniel's mind raced. Grief does strange things. It fills in blanks. It creates faces in shadows. He took 1 step forward. The hallway light flickered. The figure's head tilted slightly, not natural, too slow, too deliberate. Another step. The air pressure changed. Daniel's ears popped. The walls seemed closer. The figure raised 1 hand and crooked 1 finger, beckoning. Daniel froze. This wasn't reunion. This wasn't grief. This was invitation. And something inside him finally understood. The house wasn't showing him his father. It was showing him what he wanted most. To see how far he'd go. Suddenly, the hallway lights went out. Total darkness. A breath right beside him. Warm, close to his ear. "Daniel." He stumbled backward, heart pounding violently. The lights snapped back on. The hallway was empty. No figure, no footsteps. Nothing. Except the door to his room was now slightly open. Daniel pushed his door open slowly. The room was the same, but the air inside felt disturbed, like someone had just left. The window curtains moved gently, but the window was closed. On the desk, his notebook was open. He was certain he had closed it. Across the page, written in uneven handwriting, "You came back." His hands trembled. That was not his writing. He knew his own handwriting. Margaret appeared in the doorway behind him. She didn't knock. She didn't speak at first. Her voice, when it came, was softer than before. Rule 4. Daniel didn't turn around. "If you find something moved inside your room," she stepped closer, "leave the room immediately." "And go where?" he snapped. Margaret's reflection appeared faintly in the window glass. "To the lobby." "Why?" "Because that is the only place the house does not enter." Daniel turned sharply. "Why is it doing this?" Margaret's expression hardened. "It's testing you." "For what?" She hesitated. "For midnight." They sat in the lobby. The grandfather clock ticked loudly. Too loudly. Margaret stared at the fireplace. "It chooses 1 guest," she said quietly. "Every few years." Daniel swallowed. "For what?" "For replacement." Silence. "The house needs someone who belongs to it." "That's insane." Margaret looked at him calmly. "Your father broke Rule 1. Daniel's stomach dropped. He opened the door. The ticking clock seemed to echo deeper. "He thought it was me knocking," she continued. Or maybe you. Daniel shook his head slowly. No. At midnight, Margaret whispered, the house keeps what answers. Daniel's breathing grew shallow. Why didn't you stop him? Margaret's eyes filled, not with tears, but with something worse. Regret. Because, she said quietly, I thought it wanted me. The clock struck once. 11:59 p.m. The air shifted again. And somewhere upstairs, 3 slow knocks echoed through the hallway.
The 3 knocks echoed again. Slow. Patient. Knock. Pause. Knock. Pause. Knock. Daniel didn't move. Margaret's face had gone pale. She whispered, Rule 5. Daniel looked at her. If the knocking stops. Her voice trembled for the first time. And you hear the door handle turn? The sound came. Slowly. Metal shifting. Turning. Do not look at it. Daniel's body felt frozen. The handle outside his room began to twist. Once. Twice. Then it stopped. Silence. Heavy. Oppressive. The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the lobby. And then a 4th sound. Not a knock. Not a whisper. Footsteps. Inside the hallway. But no door had opened. Daniel felt the air behind him grow colder. Margaret's eyes widened. She wasn't looking toward the stairs. She was looking at him, over his shoulder. Very slowly, Daniel felt breath on the back of his neck. Warm. Familiar. A voice, barely audible. You left me here. Daniel did not turn. He remembered the rule. Do not look. But tears formed in his eyes. The voice sounded exactly like his father. Not distorted, not monstrous. Just tired. You promised you'd come back for me. Daniel's voice cracked. I was 8. The temperature dropped further. The windows rattled violently. Margaret whispered urgently, It feeds on guilt. The presence moved closer. Open the door, the voice said gently. We can go home. Daniel clenched his fists. This wasn't his father. It was the house, wearing his memory, twisting it, using it. He closed his eyes. I release you. The words felt strange, foreign. I forgive you. The pressure in the room shifted, like something tightening, and then snapping. A loud crack echoed through the walls. The chandelier flickered violently. The breath vanished. The cold lifted. Upstairs, a door slammed shut, hard. Then silence. For several seconds, nothing moved. Margaret slowly exhaled. It failed, she whispered. Daniel opened his eyes, but the relief was short-lived. The grandfather clock stopped ticking. Completely. Margaret's expression changed. No. The staircase groaned, wood splitting. The walls trembled. Cracks spread across the ceiling like veins. Daniel grabbed Margaret's arm. We need to leave. She shook her head slowly. It won't let both of us. The front door slammed shut violently. The windows blackened, not with darkness, but with ocean water, as if the sea had risen to swallow the house whole. The building tilted slightly, wood screaming under pressure. Margaret looked at Daniel calmly. It chooses one,
Before he could react, she pushed him toward the door. The lock clicked open. The wind burst inward. Daniel stumbled outside onto the wet cobblestone path. He turned. "Margaret!" She stood in the doorway, calm, accepting. "The house always needs someone," she said softly. The door slammed shut. The windows shattered. Water rushed violently against the structure, but strangely, the ocean never touched Daniel. The inn groaned once more. Then, it was still. The storm was gone. The sky was clear. The cliff looked peaceful. Daniel stood where the inn had been. But the ghostly Tides Inn was still there, untouched. No cracks, no broken windows, no damage. As if nothing had happened. Police reports later would say the property had been abandoned for decades. No registered caretaker named Margaret Wells, no active bookings, and no record of the inn operating in 1998. Daniel returned one last time before leaving Oregon. He stood at the edge of the cliff and looked up. One window, second floor, end of the hallway. The curtain moved slightly, and for just a second, he saw her. Margaret, standing still, watching. Behind her, a taller shadow, broad shoulders, leaning slightly to the right. Daniel didn't wave. He didn't call out. He turned and walked away. Because now he understood. The house doesn't keep the weak. It keeps the willing. And sometimes, letting go is the only way to survive. Night falls again. The inn stands alone, wind brushing the cliff. A car approaches slowly in the distance. Headlights cut through the fog. Inside the inn, a hallway, dim lights. At the far end, a door. Knock. Pause. Knock. Pause. Knock. The door handle slowly begins to turn. Fade to black.
The car engine shuts off. Headlights fade. A young woman steps out, early 30s, travel-worn, nervous but pretending not to be. She checks her phone. No signal. She looks up at the towering Victorian structure in front of her, the ghostly Tides Inn. It looks warm tonight, welcoming. A single porch light glows softly. The ocean behind it is calm. Too calm. She walks toward the front door, hesitates, then knocks. Before her hand touches the wood, the door opens. Standing there, a tall man in his late 20s, calm eyes, tired expression, familiar posture. "Welcome," he says gently. His voice is warm, human, normal. "I'm Daniel. I manage the property." The woman smiles nervously. "I thought this place was closed." Daniel steps aside. "It reopens when it's needed." She laughs softly, assuming it's a joke. She steps inside. The door closes behind her. The lobby is dim. The grandfather clock ticks slowly. Steady. Alive. And just for a brief second, behind Daniel, in the reflection of the dark window, an elderly woman stands in the corner, watching. Margaret. She does not move. Midnight. The hallway upstairs is silent. The young woman lies awake in her room. The ocean sounds distant. The air feels heavier than before. Her phone screen lights up. 12:14 a.m. She exhales slowly. Probably just nerves. Old building,
New place. Then, knock. Soft. Slow. Even. She freezes. Knock. Pause. Knock. Pause. Knock. Her eyes widen. She remembers what Daniel said casually during check-in. If you hear anything strange at night, just ignore it. She sits up slowly. The handle begins to turn, metal grinding softly. Her breathing becomes shallow. "Hello?" she whispers. The knocking stops. Silence. Then, footsteps in the hallway. Very close. A shadow passes under her door. She swallows hard. "Daniel?" No answer. Then, a whisper from directly outside. Warm, gentle, familiar. "Open the door." Her hand trembles as it moves toward the handle. The camera slowly pans down the empty hallway. All lights flicker. At the far end, a tall silhouette stands still, watching, waiting. The door handle inside her room clicks softly, as if unlocking itself. Cut to black. The sound of the ocean grows louder. And one final whisper. It chooses one.